Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, When a Pastor Takes Advantage of His Position, the Last Thing He Should Do is Mess with IT. I have been a computer technician for more than 15 years. I have worked on all kinds of computers. Everything from tiny point-of-sale computers to large rack server computers. I had been attending a new to my church. I was trying to date a woman there. This church was her idea. That relationship crashed and burned, but that's a different story. Now we can start. It was about 5 years ago. I had just sat through a long sermon about generosity and giving to those that need help. At the end of the sermon, Pastor Bob asked for an additional donation because the church's roof needed repairs. And it would cost $20,000 US. That's right, 20,000 freedom dollars for a new roof. After the service, I'm talking to my date. Pastor Bob walks over to me. I said hi and he introduced himself. We talked a bit. Pastor Bob asked what I do for a living. I tell him I'm a computer tech with a shop. As I'm telling him, I have a feeling he already knows what I do. Pastor Bob asks me to have a look at his laptop. It's being very slow. So I agree. I turn the laptop on and I hear a clicking noise. This clues me in it's probably the hard drive. But I can still access the data. This is a good thing because it means I can probably recover the data. So, I tell Pastor Bob the hard drive is dying and it needs to be replaced. I also tell him I can probably recover the data. Pastor Bob asked how much it would cost to fix. I tell him for most people I would charge around $250. However, I feel I can donate my time, so I would just need $60 for a new hard drive. Pastor Bob agrees, so I write up an invoice. New hard drive $60, labor $0, data recovery $0, and 2 to 4 days for repair. Pastor Bob signed the invoice. Thus, I take the laptop to my shop. I open the laptop. HP, why do you use so many screws and clips? I get the hard drive out and connect it to my recovery rig. I set up the recovery to clone the data to a new hard drive. But not the new one for the laptop. A high-end storage drive. I go home after locking up the shop. Next day, Monday, I open the shop and check the recovery rig. It's working, but it will take at least 10 more hours. So, I start work on the other tickets. Then at closing time I lock up and go home. Next day, Tuesday, I've had Pastor Bob's laptop for 2 days. I open the shop and check my recovery rig. Good news, recovery completed, 100% data recovered. Report says hard drive developed too many bad sectors. Now I have a choice to make. I could put a 1 terabyte hard drive $60 or a 120 gigabytes SSD $60, or I could pay some money myself for a 240 gigabytes SSD $100. I decided why not and put the 240 gigabytes SSD in the laptop. I then clone all the data over from the new recovery storage drive to the new 240 gigabytes SSD. An hour later the clone is done. So, I check everything. The laptop works great and is exactly like how it was before the first hard drive died. Even the logins still worked. Therefore, I call Pastor Bob and tell him his computer is done. He says that's great, he will be here soon to get it. About 45 minutes later, Pastor Bob walks in. I show him his laptop working and much faster. He loves it and signs the pickup form. He then pays me with a check for $60. It's important he paid with a check. I do a bank run on Monday and Friday. So that Friday at the bank, I am informed that Pastor Bob's check is void. What? Why? Pastor Bob had placed a stop payment on the check. Consequently, I called him and he ignored my call. I go to church on Sunday. Pastor Bob gives a sermon about not lying. I walk up to talk to him and he avoids me. So, I leave and decide I'm going to write it off. I spent $100 and some time to do something nice. A few weeks later, a customer walks in looking for a new computer. To welcome him, I offer him a drink and go over his options. I'm chatting him up and he tells me he is a contractor. He mostly does siding and roofing. He is thinking about offering solar. That's why he is getting a new computer. I ask how much does a new roof cost. He says up to about $10,000. So I ask him why would someone say $20,000. He had no idea. I thought it was strange. I asked about the church. The contractor said it would have been simple and around $5,000, and he could probably do it for less. Contractor buys a nice new laptop. Something about what the contractor said bugs me later. Why would Pastor Bob lie and say $20,000 for a new roof? And why would he stiff me for $60? I then remember I never cleared the recovery rig storage drive. I check and there it is, Pastor Bob's laptop data. I look around, it's slow and I'm all caught up on repair tickets. Fittingly I look around a bit. He had all of his logins stored in a folder on the desktop, including his online dating logins and online poker. Did I ever mention Pastor Bob is married? I start printing his online dating messages. I look back and find Pastor Bob had been adult hugging several women from his online dating. He had been paying for his dates from the church's donation fund. I am getting angry now. Then I realize he had adult hugged the woman I was dating when I was dating her. It was then I decided to break Pastor Bob. I printed out all his dating messages and the women he adult hugged. For the last 6 months, except I refused to print the naughty pictures. It was an impressive packet. I then decide I need copies of the packet. Therefore, I order 100 packets printed from a major online printer. A few days later my order of revenge packets arrived. These revenge packets are amazing, double-sided, staple-bound, with a cover with Pastor Bob's face on it. Now the conclusion, and I think it's worth it. This church had a calendar of what the sermon might be about. A perfect Sunday was approaching. I go to church that perfect Sunday. I show up a bit late. Everyone is in the church, so I put a revenge packet on each car. I have a few revenge packets that are in yellow envelopes. Fittingly I put them in the mail. I sent one to all the high-ups in the church. And I sent a special packet with some of Pastor Bob's naughty pics to Pastor Bob's wife. I set the return address to the church. I also emailed a bunch of people the revenge packet from a burner email. A couple weeks after I went back to that church, Pastor Bob was gone, so was the wife. Several of the women were also gone, including the one I was dating. I asked one of the important people there, what happened? The answer was amazing. I was told about the revenge packet and how everyone had gotten one. The day my revenge packet appeared, the sermon Pastor Bob had given was about the evils of adultery and cheating on your wife. Thank you, church calendar. The fallout: Pastor Bob was fired and shunned. Multiple women from the church have not returned, including the one I was dating. Pastor Bob's wife is divorcing him. And she is the one that owned the house and cars. No longer. Pastor Bob is now being sued by several people, including the one that fixed the roof. He never paid any of them. There were also rumors of a criminal case for embezzlement. No one has seen Bob in a while now. The church might close if they can't find a new pastor. But the church's money is very low. Apparently, he also spent over $30,000 on online gambling. The next one is titled, "Hit My Mum's Car and Have Your Cop Boyfriend Cover It Up?" Now everybody knows. For some background, I live in a predominantly Caucasian suburban town in New Jersey and my family is Asian. Although the town is alright for the most part, it is not really a secret that some of the townspeople are pretty racist. One of our neighbors, let's call him Anthony, is a retired police captain from another town, but he is friends with my town's police chief. My mother is a first-generation immigrant, and although she's fluent in English, she still has a pretty thick Asian accent. A couple of years ago, my mum went to visit one of her friends on the other side of town. My mum had parallel parked directly in front of her friend's house, which is at the bottom of a small hill. As she was leaving, a woman driving a Jeep Wrangler with her children was driving down the small hill, but she was still a decent distance back, so my mum pulled out of her spot. The road they were on was really wide, with enough space to fit 5 cars next to one another, and about 40 feet ahead was a stop sign. My mum at this point was already in the middle of the road, fully out of the parking spot, and had gotten ahead about 10 feet when the woman driving the Jeep suddenly came up from behind my mum's car and cut directly in front of her, crossing a double yellow line to do so. Because she cut my mum off on an angle, the Jeep's rear wheel ended up ripping off my mum's front bumper. My mum naturally immediately stopped, and the woman got out of her car after straightening it out on the road. As soon as she stepped out of her car, this woman, we'll call her Karen, immediately starts cursing my mum out at the top of her lungs. Karen told my mum to call the police, but my mum told her that her phone had died. My mum's friend and her son, as well as the neighbor, came out of the house after hearing the commotion to see what had happened. The neighbor, an elderly man, asked what happened and Karen yelled, "Are you ducking blind? An accident happened. Go call the police. I need to call my boyfriend." The son had taken a law class in college, so he offered to take a bunch of pictures of the scene of the accident and send them to my mum later. This becomes super important later. The neighbor calls the police, but Karen's boyfriend arrives at the scene first. When the cop, let's call him Kenny, finally arrives, he asked my mum what happened. Just as my mum had just started saying her side of the story, the cop says, "Wait just a minute," and walks over to the boyfriend. As it turns out, the boyfriend, we'll call him Sam, was a cop in the town who was pretty popular with the kids in the middle schools since he would occasionally visit to talk about things like Dare and other things in assemblies. Sam was off duty at the time, so he was able to come over when Karen called him. As soon as Kenny saw his bud Sam, he immediately went to go talk with him rather than with my mum or with Karen. They discussed for a little while and afterwards sent everyone on their way. My mum tried to talk to Kenny before he left, but Kenny just brushed it off and said he got the details he needed and that my mum would be able to get the police report in about a week or two. When my mum receives the police report, she saw that it said that she pulled out without using her blinkers suddenly and hit Karen's car. On top of that, Karen was expecting for my mum's insurance to pay for the damage done to her rear wheel. My mum went to my neighbor Anthony to ask what she should do about the report since it was clearly wrong. Anthony was furious and told her that she should go to the police station and ask to see the chief, and if they ask why she needs to see him, she should tell them that it's because she wants to file an internal complaint. That day, my mum takes the photographs sent to her by the son and goes to the police station and asks the person working at the front desk to see the chief. The cop says that she could not just walk in and ask for the chief, so my mum responds, "Okay, so where should I go to file an internal complaint?" And the cop immediately straightens up and says, "Right here. Come with me." He leads her into the back. The deputy chief steps into the room and started recording the conversation. Since the chief was out, my mum presented all of the evidence to him instead. After presenting the evidence to show that it was in fact Karen who hit her instead of the other way around, my mum also says that she would like to file a corruption complaint against both Kenny and Sam. Kenny clearly did not do his job properly since he did not properly ask the actual people involved in the accident and did not even note the fact that there were 2 passengers in Karen's car in the report. Even Karen later admitted to an investigator that Kenny never once spoke to her. My mum even threw in the racist card for good measure, saying maybe Kenny wouldn't listen to her and brushed her off because of her thick Asian accent. Sam meanwhile had interfered with the investigation despite not being at the scene of the crime during the time of the accident. The deputy chief says he will start an internal investigation and will see if anything needs to be done. Meanwhile, my mum also filed a claim to her insurance and presented the evidence to them too, and her insurance decides since the accident, in their eyes, was clearly not her fault, they weren't going to pay Karen a penny and that they would contact Karen's insurance to pay my mum instead. A lot of internal bureaucratic investigational bullshit*T happens, including interviews with Karen, my mum's friend, and the friend's neighbor. About a month passed and an officer comes to our house to tell my mum that Kenny had been punished, but there was not enough evidence to punish Sam, and he just wanted to know if there were any other concerns she had. Since Karen seemingly had not done anything to further warrant any action and the damage to the car was paid for, my mum said that there was nothing else. This is the fun part. 3 days after the officer came to our door, a letter came in the mail for a court hearing. Turns out, Karen decided to file 3 tickets about my mum just 1 day before the statute of limitations. Apparently, in NJ, citizens are allowed to file complaints about other citizens breaking the law, a thing that our family had never heard of before until this happened, and because of how late she filed these complaints, by the time we received them in the mail, we could not even counter complain and the only options were to pay the fine or to go to court. We assumed that Karen learned about being able to file a complaint from Sam because no sh*T, and that the only reason she was willing to go this far is because she heard my mum had a super thick Asian accent and assumed that my mum wouldn't know what to do about the tickets and would just pay up. What she didn't count on was the fact that my mum is actually really aggressive with an absolutely massive network of people she's connected to. Within a day, my mum hired a lawyer to fight the case and they immediately asked to change the court from the small court in our town to one of the large courts a couple of towns away. The logic was that if she fought the case in our town, my mum would be at a disadvantage since her case was essentially going against our town's beloved police force, but by putting it in a different town, the playing field would be even. Additionally, while my mum worked from home in her own business, Karen had a full-time job in town, so going to court in a different town would be a huge pain in the butt for her. The lawyer had prepared a large amount of evidence against Karen, so there was no way she was actually going to win the case no matter what. Come to the court date, Karen never showed up, so the case was thrown out. That was a pretty nice win, but what came after was even better. Since my mother and sister have a lot of friends in town, the story of Karen and Sam doing this shady bullcrap got out really fast. Soon, half the town had heard about it, and suddenly Karen and Sam went from two favorites in the town because of Sam's reputation to two of the most underhanded and nasty people. Sam stopped getting invited to school assemblies and Karen was ostracized in her kids' school's PTA. Anthony also ended up talking to the police chief in private, and we found out that although Sam was not officially punished, he was severely reprimanded by the chief. The next one is titled, Cheat on Me? I'll just leave you a bunch of annoying little gifts everywhere. Living with a guy from the age of 19, I was besotted. He was a little older than me, and a drummer. As a teenager, I was bowled over and besotted, and it was only a couple of months after we met that I moved in with him. We'll call him PBB for ponytailed brummy bastard. I really loved him. Even when he told me he was still in love with his ex, who had cheated on him, and would insist I should do the housework and shopping and cooking. Even though we both worked full-time because it was his house, he earned more than me, and I didn't pay any rent. All of my wages went into his bank account in his name. In case you missed it, I loved him, I really did, even when he'd started to go out and happened to iron his own shirt. Wearing aftershave. Even when he went out for a couple with the lads, then stumble in the bedroom at 3 a.m., hardly able to stand. His excuse? Someone had spiked his drink. I even still loved him when he came in at 3 a.m., with his iron shirt all creased, aftershave on, and with a shag tag glowing from his neck. His excuse? My mate Steve did it to me for a laugh. I moved into the spare room in protest. Surely he would come in, apologize, change his ways, promise not to go out as often, not come back as drunk. Nope. This stalemate went on for 2 months. I still loved him, but moved out to my parents' house at the age of 25. I just moved a few things out with me, just my cassette stereo, lol, a couple of decades old this story, and my clothes. I even left my beloved cat behind, on the agreement when I get my own place I can come back and reclaim him. For some reason he let me keep a key. I realized only a couple of days later I had forgotten the lead for my boombox. I knew he was going to be out with the lads at the time I was driving back from work, so deliberately timed it when he wasn't at home. Pre-mobile phones, I'm not having the pain of speaking to him, too much, I love him. In and out, the job is done. I walk in, something is wrong. The house is clean. Not clean, but clean. Wait, what's this on the mantelpiece? A generic love card, no occasion, but you know the kind, a la Roger the Rabbit, how much do I love you? Let me count the ways. Inside was neat flowery writing, Dear PBB, I love you so much, from. Slowly, I see the cassette answerphone machine is flashing with a message. My curiosity turbocharges me over there. Oh little red flashing light, what can you tell me? The female voice purrs, oh, PBB, I had such a lovely night last night, I can't wait to do it again soon. Looking around the room, 2 wine glasses. By this time my head is like a volcano. I run upstairs to the room and there's a ducking wedding ring next to his side of the bed. WTF. I am shuddering, crying, drive back to my parents' house in bits. I walk in the door, sobbing so hard and loud my mum asked if I had been abused. I couldn't talk for the snot bubbles of anguish. Why doesn't he love me? We talk, and I want revenge, but more than petty. I plot. I plan. I think of sewing prawns into the hems of his curtains. Too much hassle. Cutting his clothes up? Not my style. I am too subtle for that. I want long-range passive revenge. Dad got a van. We went the next day, Saturday, with the cat basket. Everything that I had bought and left behind I was going to take. Only things that were mine. That was the only rule. Side note, PBB used to half-work every Saturday at a music store in town, talking drums and crap. He was screwing the owner's sister. I recognized her voice and name from the love card. So, I took the washing machine I had bought 3 months earlier. Did I mention he was a drummer? I replaced it with a washboard and thimbles he used for percussion. I took the tin of Christmas ham that was out of date in the cupboard. I took the cutlery as it was a Eternal bow and I bought it from Argos. I took the tea bags, as I had bought the last lot. I took the double bed and mattress, and I took my cat. Just before we left, I told Dad to sit in the van. I had my own special goodbye to say. The previous night I had found every single printed photo of his face. This took an hour. Before camera phones etc., I cut them all up and ripped them into quarters. I hid handfuls under carpets, inside vases with dried flowers, behind picture frames, under ornaments, back of cupboards, inside the freezer ice cube tray and behind the bath panel. Nothing obvious to the eye. Whilst I was in the bathroom, I opened the cabinet and saw his precious dupe aftershave. I crouched over the toilet, P*SSED in it and put the top back on. Finally, I took the cassette recording from the answering machine, stopped off on the way home at a phone box, rang the music store where he always hung out on a Saturday, asked to speak to him and said in a calm, controlled voice, "You have 1 week to tell her husband." Or I do, and hung up. I sold the bed the same day to a bloke down the pub, sold the washing machine cut price to an elderly neighbor, and resettled my cat into my parents' home. He loved it there. I had a phone call at 3 a.m. when he got home to see he had no bed or washing machine and spat down the phone that I was an evil vitreous idiot. When I got up in the morning I had to get the dictionary out as it was pre-Google and I had no idea what vitreous meant. 3 months later part 2 came into play. I started to call his friends, pretend I was drunk, giggle and confess I had *SSED in his aftershave, so eventually, word got out what I had done, but it was too late by then. The last one is titled, "It's Your Party? Okay, you can pay for it." I used to wait tables at an upscale restaurant that was known to be the place to have your holiday or office parties. Great money if you got the right group. The menus were pre-set, the grapes and spirits were pre-set, and it was all auto-graded at 18%. All of it was in the contract the host signed pre-event. Usually, the host would make themselves known fairly early on so you would know who to talk to if there was an issue and who to give the check to at the end of the night. One night, I am splitting a party of 30 to 40 with another server. This event had top-tier food and mid-level grapes and spirits. Very nice. A small group of 5 to 6 people arrives a bit ahead of schedule. 2 guys and 3 to 4 women. Not a problem, it's actually nicer if they slowly roll in so we can get drinks started. I walk over, introduce myself and the other waiter, and ask for drinks. Now this was back in the early 2000s and chads weren't a thing yet, but the 2 guys were the chattiest chads. If they could have popped their collars in their suits, I'm sure these guys would have found a way. Super Chad 1, me and my bro are going to start with a round of Johnny Walker Blue, and these ladies are going to have expensive red grapes. Super Chad 2, turning to the girls, once you have Johnny Blue, you just can't drink anything else. It changes you, bro, me, if you like, I can put those on a separate tab. The event contract has Johnny Walker Black, but not blue, and the red grape selection for tonight is less expensive grapes. Super Chad 1, this is our party, just get me what I ordered and don't question me again. Super Chad 2, who do you think you are? You're just some waiter, we have MBAs. Just get us our drinks. I walk over to the other waiter and tell him we are in for a hell of a night, but the check should be nice. For those that don't know, Johnny Walker Blue is 3 to 4x the cost of Johnny Black. So one round of drinks for these people is over $100. The whole night goes exactly as we thought. Nothing was good enough, the appetizers were crap, the food was horrible, not enough bread, too many bread plates. Drinks were taking too long, why do some people have food and others don't? It's 40 people man, it takes a minute to get that much food out. To make it worse, Chads and Co are all over the place, moving seats and making others move so they can talk to who they want. This makes serving hell because we did everything by seat number. Surprisingly, most of the table was normal, not entitled people and who knew that waiters are people too. They were impressed by the food, and graciously ordered the drinks that were in the contract. One older gentleman at the other end of the table from the Chads apologized for their behavior, saying, they might have fancy degrees and good jobs, but you can't teach class. Love that guy. Finally, they are winding down and after drinking almost a full bottle of Johnny Blue along with all the other food and drinks they have a very hefty check, and the other waiter and I are excited to get paid. We start picking up the dessert plates and asking for last drink requests. The nice older guy at the end of the table says to bring him the check. Not wanting any more interaction with the Chads than necessary, I bring it to him. I tell him I can take care of it whenever and go about clearing the table. A few minutes later he calls me over. Nice guy, maybe there was a mistake in ringing up the drinks? There is almost $600 for Johnny Blue when the contract I signed only included Johnny Black. And there are some single glasses of wine that are different from what we agreed upon. Me, no mistake sir, that is what was ordered and drank. He is being awesome, and I feel bad. Nice guy, why did you give the drinks to them when we clearly had a contract? Me, I apologize, sir, they told me that this was their party and since I was just a waiter to shut up and do as I was told. So I did. I'm sorry, I took them at their word. I point them out and he calls them over. What follows was the singularly greatest butt-chewing I have ever been witness to. He goes on about how he was doing something nice but apparently that wasn't enough. About how horrible their behavior was that night and how he is ashamed for them. But my favorite line was how you see a person's true colors in how they treat people that work for them, and they had shown theirs. Then he calls me back over. Nice guy, apparently I thought this was my party. I guess I was wrong. This is their party and they will be taking care of the check. Oh, and up the gratuity to 25%. You earned it. He turns around and walks off, leaving the Chads with the check. All in all, it was about $3,000. I have never seen two grown men look so defeated. Thanks for listening.